Okay, so Angeli says that she's signed up today because she's not confident if she's on top of my game for strategic thinking. Okay, that is a great place. This is a great place to start. You'll hear lots about how to get started and maybe a couple of things that you could potentially improve as well. But maybe you're already on top of your game. Who knows? Poppy says, having a conversation with someone at work and realizing how much I wasn't thinking strategically. Okay, so sometimes having these conversations with other colleagues is really helpful because you get insight into how they think and, yeah, how you might be able to improve your strategic thinking as well. Tanya says, I'm very results oriented and do not always stop to think about the big picture. Perfect. Strategic thinking is a lot about big picture thinking, as you'll hear today. I know I lack strategic thinking. Perfect. You're in the right place. I want to be more strategic at work. And it's something that is part of my job, but I don't feel like I'm strategic enough. Okay. Perfect. You are all in the right place. We are going to learn a few things today. If my slides will move, here we go. So there are three main things you're going to learn. So firstly, let's go back to basics quickly and just define what is strategic thinking. What happens if you aren't strategic at work? So a lot of you have already identified that you lack it, but it's really important to know why you need to be strategic. Otherwise, what's the point? And finally, ways you can start improving your strategic thinking. So these are really practical things that all of you can start today, where you can start to gain that strategic thinking muscle. Now, a bit about me. I have some of my lovely clients on here today, so it's lovely to see you all. But I am Tiffany Dawson, if you've never met me before. And my job is to teach women in STEM, just like yourselves, step-by-step frameworks to become confident, strategy savvy, and influential leaders with ease and grace. So obviously, we are talking a lot about strategy today. And I now work full-time as a career coach for women in STEM, where I provide private coaching, group workshops for corporates. I also speak at events about gender equality in STEM because that is so important to me. And I'm also a host of my own podcast, How to Be a STEMinist. So if you haven't listened before, there are a bunch of different topics. I know all of you have probably faced at least one or two of them before. So go ahead, have a search of How to Be a STEMinist. You might find an episode that will be useful to you today. Now, I used to be a mechanical engineer in the construction industry, and I worked there for about 8 years across Australia and the UK. I am from Australia. You might be able to hear from my voice. Although I am told I kind of sometimes dip into this quasi-British accent, which I find highly embarrassing. But anyway, so I've worked across Australia and the UK, and really similarly, both places suffer a lot from lack of gender equality in STEM. And I often found myself being the only female, especially the only female of color, in a lot of my meeting rooms. And I did start to lose my confidence at some point midway through my career because I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought I was not getting the opportunities that my colleagues were because I wasn't good enough at my job. But really, it was because I never got taught how to do some really, really simple things that we could do to all move our careers forward. So I want to tell you a bit of a story of when was I? Maybe 3 or 4 years into my mechanical engineering career. And I had done everything my boss told me to, plus more. So I was working in London at the time, and I used to work overtime. I used to come in early, work overtime. I got all the tasks done, everything that was asked of me. And I was like, okay, I don't feel that fulfilled in my job, but I feel like I'm doing a good job. I'm doing everything I'm being asked. And when I sat down with my boss for my annual review, he sat me down and said, okay, Tiff, you haven't really been progressing as much as we had expected you to. And he compared me to one of my peers who seemed to be doing all this amazing work. And I really took a massive hit to my confidence. I don't know if any of you have experienced anything like that before, where you feel like you're doing the right things plus more, yet you're being told you're not doing a good enough job. And that really got me thinking, you know, I was so confused. Why is this? Like, why am I doing all the things but being told I wasn't good enough? Now I can look back and be like, okay, it's because I wasn't strategic. I was just doing what I was told instead of thinking for myself. And that was the real jump I needed to make. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. Now, for those of you who signed up at least 2 days ago, you will have gotten an email from me about signing up for your career clarity call. I know some of you have already signed up, which is great. So that actually means I only have 4 spaces left in April. They're running out really quickly. A career clarity call is a free 30-minute coaching call with me where we'll dive into your current career challenge, see if there is an action that I can suggest to you to move yourself forward. We may talk about whether coaching is suitable for you or not. It's not suitable for everyone that I speak to, but you will walk out of this 30-minute call feeling like you have some direction. So if you've been stuck on a challenge, you've been going round and round in your head for ages, this is where you can do that. So I will, if you haven't sign up already and that's something you want to do, in the chat box I've just given you the link to go and book your career clarity call. This month is probably going to be the last month that I do it, so that I can really reserve my energy for my paying clients. So yeah, if this is something that you've been thinking about doing for a while and you haven't, this is your time. Let's get going. So what is strategic thinking? Does anyone know? You're welcome to unmute yourselves and answer this. What is strategic thinking? Anyone brave enough to have a go? You're also welcome to use the chat box. So Tanya said something in the chat box before, which really did kind of explain a part of strategic thinking, which is big picture thinking. Okay, so, you know, looking a few steps ahead, thinking about the bigger picture and not getting stuck in the detail. So let's go into this. So what is strategic thinking? I'm going to first start off with what a lot of people think strategic thinking is, but it's not really. This is how we perceive strategic people. Does anyone agree? So we often think that strategic people are sly, they're full of like sleazy, dirty tricks. And, you know, I'm sure we have all here been tricked by someone before, and it's not nice, you know? It's like they thought a few steps ahead of us and used that to their advantage to throw us under the bus so that we would maybe do something that we didn't actually want to. We were tricked into, I don't know, maybe giving away money or part of our timetable to something we didn't actually want it to, and it was all for their gain. It wasn't for our gain at all. In fact, it was for our loss. So I think that this is potentially one of the reasons why a lot of us kind of are a bit scared to think about how to be more strategic, because we don't want to be like these people. And unfortunately, this is sometimes the only role model we have for strategic thinking. But I want to bust that myth to you today. Strategic people, has anyone watched Queen's Gambit? I love that show, it's so good. Anyway, this is a shot from Queen's Gambit, but what being strategic really looks like is what I said before: big picture thinking, planning ahead, thinking maybe a few steps ahead, or the, you know, maybe this could happen, so what should I do? Maybe this risk might happen, so how can I mitigate that? And in order to be strategic, you need to not get stuck in the weeds and detail all the time. Many of us are perfectionists or people who really like to get all the detail right, and there is a time and place for that, but it is not all the time. sometimes we need to zoom out, take ourselves out of the situation and really think about the big picture. So really, it's like, stop being a busybody all the time. You need to kind of start having a think about the big picture. But what happens if you're not strategic at work? Let me know in the chat box. What do you think? What would happen if you continued to not be strategic? So a lot of you have already said you lack strategic thinking. You've identified it's something that your colleagues have. What is it about strategic thinking that would happen if, what would happen if you didn't do it? Anyone have any ideas in the chat box? Angie, I'm glad you liked Queen's Gambit. It's so good, wasn't it? Anyone want to have a guess what would happen? Why are you here though, Why did you want to increase your strategic thinking? So Poppy says, end up following a career path you're not keen on. Absolutely. So strategic thinking also goes for your own career path. Definitely. If you don't stop to think, you might climb a ladder that you actually don't want to get to the top of. Charlie says you might get stuck in the same position. Yes, absolutely. You might not progress because you haven't exercised your strategic thinking. You haven't gotten to that next level of thinking. Angie says, wouldn't progress, becomes stagnant. You're typing at a great speed, Angie, no problems. Not knowing where to go. Yep. So not having the time to think about where to go next. And finding it hard to get what you want next. Yes, absolutely. These are all correct. And here are a couple more things. So if you're not strategic, you'll get left behind. I think someone did say that. You'll become stagnant. You'll get stuck in the same position, Charlie said. So, you'll get left behind because other people around you are kind of working a bit more smarter than you, but you're working really hard. So I know in the engineering world, we always love to say, work smarter, not harder. And that goes for your own career as well. You'll also do anything that you're told. So kind of like my story that I told at the start, I just did everything I was told. I was being a real good girl, but I accepted everything that was thrown at me and I didn't ever stop to question what I was doing, whether it was right or not, or whether it was the best use of my time. So I became really busy, but I wasn't going anywhere. It's the worst, isn't it? You work really hard and you don't go anywhere. And finally, you'll have no influence. So you might feel really resentful that there's heaps on your to-do list, but you lack fulfillment. You've got no influence towards other people. It's like you don't have a say, you don't have a voice. All you're doing is being a task horse. So those of you who are in my Facebook group, Wonder Women in STEM, if you're not there already, I highly recommend you join. Go and search Wonder Women in STEM over on Facebook groups. But in my Facebook group or also on my Instagram, you might have heard me talk about something called the murky middle. And this is what I call the middle of your career. So you're past the junior stage, but you're not quite at the senior stage. And you're in this transition period. And I like to call this the murky middle because it is a really, really confusing place to be at times. When you're a junior, you are treated like someone who needs to be told what to do. And that's totally fine at the time. You accept everyone's advice, you listen to people who are more senior than you, and you're basically being a good student, doing what you're told. When you're a leader, it's the complete opposite. No one tells you what to do. You need to figure it out for yourself. When you're in the middle of your career, you're in this transition period and it's kind of a little bit awkward because you do have people more senior than you telling you what to do, but then you're also expected to think for yourself. So the way that you're treated in the middle of your career is that you're treated like a junior. People give you tasks to do, but you're expected to act like a senior. You're expected to draw on your own experiences and I guess, have a say, have an opinion, and really voice any concerns and question things. So I want to make you all aware of that. If you are in the middle of your career and you're feeling like it's so unfair, people are telling me what to do or telling me what not to do, and then I'm getting punished for it, like I was, then this is where you're at. You almost have to start teaching people to treat you more like a senior by voicing your own opinions. Okay, so, if you're not strategic at work, then the effect to you is that you carry all the load, like all the workload, but you don't get recognized for it. You get seen as a task horse, but someone who can't think. Cool, Angie, I'm glad you agree there. Now, it's not just you who gets affected if you're not strategic. Okay, it affects other people in your team as well. So let's have a think about that for a second. The way that it might affect your team if you don't grow your strategic thinking is that you lack efficiency or effectiveness. So there might be stuff on your ever-growing to-do list that actually aren't a good use of your time. Or maybe they're totally useless, but someone told you to do them and you just went ahead and did them, and then your boss is like, why is she spending all this time doing this? Okay, so you could be more efficient, or there might be a better way of doing it that you haven't thought about because you were told to do it a certain way. So you could be more efficient or more effective in your job. So create more value by thinking strategically, by maybe being a little bit rebellious and doing things a different way. The other thing is that your team won't benefit from your unique perspective. If we just continue doing what we're told and not thinking for ourselves, then what's the point in you being there? What's the point in your unique perspective, your own experiences, and whether it is past work experiences or experiences outside of work, you all have a unique perspective that no one else in the world has. And you have to use that to benefit your team to work more effectively. And the third thing is that you might be the only person who could spot this risk or to come up with a new idea. Because again, your brain is unique. You think a specific way. If you're not allowing yourself the time and space and skill to think more strategically, then your team could be missing out on these amazing ideas that you have, or might run into risks that you could have maybe mitigated if you had some time to think about it. So the main message here is that it also affects other people. It doesn't just affect your own career development. You won't allow your team to make the most of your full potential. Does anyone have any, so Angie says we don't put ourselves out there and take risks. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions so far on what I have talked about?
So, quick question.
Sure.
So this is March, and I think in many organizations, new financial year is starting from April.
Yeah.
So that means making sure that your manager, notices you, and if at all there is going to be any kind of promotion cycle, then you're a part of it.
Yeah.
Etc. Because gone are those days when you have completed certain number of years at a level, you would be promoted.
Yes.
That doesn't happen anymore. But you can think strategically to probably improve your learning, etc., etc. But then, how to think in a way wherein you can think from your manager's perspective, maybe, and then can influence him or her to promote you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best ways to do this is firstly to be aware of what matters to your manager. So, I would ask you, do you know what's important to your manager? Do you know what their goals are? And can you align any of your goals to theirs? I'm not saying to necessarily just follow what they want to do, because otherwise you'll just become a carbon copy of your manager, which isn't helpful to anyone.
Yeah.
But, is there anything that you want in your own career development that could also help your manager? And the best way to get your manager to notice you is to be helpful to them. So this is a win-win situation, isn't it? You help your manager and you help yourself. How do you
Got it.
feel about that?
Feels great. Yeah, because my manager is not very open, so to speak. So if you will ask him that, what do you think that team can improve on, or probably I can improve on, the feedback he gives, I feel is not enough.
Yeah. So this is your chance to start acting a little bit more strategically. So instead of just asking what you could do, find out for yourself. So go and find out what your manager is maybe struggling with, doesn't have enough time to do, doesn't want to do, is their goals, and try and see how you can align your goals to help them. I hope that helps.
It does. Thanks.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. All right, let's get on to the juicy part, a few ways that you can improve your strategic thinking. I love giving out practical actions. So here we go. The first thing is question everything. Question every task that you have. So if you are the type of person who keeps a to-do list at work, go through every single task and ask yourself these questions. You're welcome to screenshot this slide or to take a photo of it with your phone. What value does this task bring? Okay, if you don't ask yourself this question, then you could be potentially spending your time on something that doesn't matter. Okay, so what value does this task bring? The next most important thing to ask yourself is, who does it bring value to? Because we can do something that's really valuable to someone who doesn't matter to us. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but who is it that you are supposed to help in your role? Is it a client? Is it your manager? Is it your, if you're a leader, is it your team members? But if your task that you're doing, that you're spending your time and energy on, helps someone that's got nothing to do with you, then it's time to try and cut that out, because it's got nothing to do with your role. The next question to ask is, am I the best person to do it? So this might come in the form in, is there someone else who could help me with this? Is there someone else who would be more efficient at this? Or is this something I really want to learn to do? Should I even be doing it? Do I enjoy doing it? Am I the best person to be doing it? And if the answer is no, then you need to find someone who wants to do this task and would help them. So it's not just palming off tasks that you don't want to other people. It is actually getting to know your colleagues well enough to know, actually, this task that I don't want to do, it's part of this person's set of goals. They really enjoy doing this, or they really want to grow in this area. So I'm going to remove this task from me that's not serving me and give it to someone so that it serves them. And finally, is there a different way to get the same or better results? This is probably the most strategic question that you can ask. And it's something that strategic people do really well. They always come up with creative new ways of doing things to achieve the same result or a better result by doing it a different way. So it's time to get those creative juices going. If you're feeling like you're just a task horse getting stuff ticked off your to-do list, allow yourself a little bit of time. This doesn't have to take long, maybe 5 minutes at the start of each day, focusing on one task, saying, is there a better way to do this? How could this be done? When we get stuck too much into our to-do lists and kind of get caught up in the panic of getting everything done, we don't allow ourselves the headspace and the time to ask these questions. Okay, the next one is urgent versus important. Urgent does not equal important. Okay, so urgent stuff is, I guess, they're tasks that need to be done immediately. There's a time limit. Important stuff is I guess things that don't necessarily have to be done immediately, but they are really important. Stuff like, in day-to-day life, eating healthily, exercising, they're not urgent. And therefore, that's why they are sometimes the first things to go when we're really busy, but they're really important, you know? So you need to know where to focus your efforts. In the workplace, an example could be, building good relationships with your network might be really important to your role in the future. So if you're becoming a leader, or if you're becoming someone who wants to be known as an expert in your field, building a network, building relationships with other people is really important, but it's never urgent. You never have to like immediately have coffee with someone the next day, but it's important. So you need to now notice, are you spending more time in which quadrant? Are you doing stuff that's urgent or important? So to give you an example, if you can plot all of your tasks, all your to-do lists tasks on this quadrant graph, by the way. So if you're kind of unsure, have a go at this. But if any of your tasks land in this quadrant where it's not urgent and not important, it is a waste of time. You need to stop doing these things. You need to find a way to stop doing these tasks. The next thing is urgent stuff. Good, Angie. I hope you get to use this. Okay, urgent, whether it's important or not, it is a reaction. You're being reactive if you're doing lots of urgent stuff. And yes, sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes your boss runs into the room saying, Tiff, I need this report done today. And yeah, you might have to drop everything and do these urgent things. But good, Angie, I'm glad you have also experienced this before. If you are spending a lot of your time in these two quadrants, so doing urgent stuff, whether it's important or not, then something has to change. You need to start being more strategic. You need to start forward thinking, maybe planning for things that are going to happen, things that might derail your plans. Yeah. And unsurprisingly, the most strategic people and the most calm workers, they spend most of their time in this quadrant. Things that are important, but not urgent. When we work on things that aren't urgent, it allows us to think with a clear mind, to plan, to mitigate risks before they happen. So this is a really great place to try and start getting most of your tasks into. Number 3, I touched on this before briefly. Stop being a busybody. If you are the type of person, and I used to be like this, I used to get into work at the start of each day and write down my to-do list, which I knew was too long for me to ever finish. I'd just get in, check my emails, add things to my to-do list, and just get stuck straight in without thinking. If this is you, you're not alone, but I do encourage you to kind of just take a deep breath at the start of the day, have a look through your to-do list, think about whether they're important or urgent or not, and really zoom out. Okay, so things that you might be able to ask yourself is, what needs to happen to make this task faster, or my client happier, or my team run more smoothly? You can also stop being a busybody by focusing on things that your manager cares about, just like I was talking to Anjali about. What does my manager care about that I also want to work on? What crazy ideas, what creative ideas do I have to solve that? Okay, so many of us, we have STEM careers because we love problem solving. We love to be creative. And somewhere along the way, we lose sight of that. We get so busy that we don't allow ourselves time to think creatively. So this is your chance to start doing that. Allow yourself to be a bit more adventurous in all the tasks that you're doing and how you do them. And maybe think about whether the process of doing these tasks could be improved or be done a better way that you enjoy doing it. And fourth and finally, you, now that you're starting to think strategically, you now have to have your own opinion. Okay, so instead of blindly following advice like we do when we're juniors, when we don't have our own experiences to draw on, you need to start using your own past experiences to develop ideas. You need to start having your own thoughts and your own opinions and voicing them. You know, you can't just have these thoughts and then when they don't go your way afterwards be like, oh yeah, I knew that would happen. You have to start doing something about it. You have to act on them. So the way you do that is to articulate them to your team, and you need to find a way to do it that you don't feel pushy. I know a lot of women come to me saying, you know, I've got these great ideas, but I don't want to voice them in case I hurt someone or I sound too pushy or sound too forceful. And I do have a quick tip on this if anyone kind of finds themselves in this situation. If you're not sure how to articulate your ideas without feeling like you're pushing someone into doing something, it goes into, yeah, and Andrea's right. It's important to voice your opinions without being too opinionated. You know, you are allowed to have opinions, but you need to do it in a way that is kind to others. The mistake I see most women make is that when they want to start articulating their ideas, they're like, right, I'm going to start doing this now. I'm going to start having a voice. And the focus for them is more about being heard. The focus is on themselves. How can I be heard? How can I make sure that everyone hears my idea? This is where people will start coming to you saying, you're sounding a bit pushy there. What's going on? You can't be talking to people like that. And then you're like, oh, but you know, I just wanted to voice my ideas and now you're telling me to shut up. The way to combat this is really flipping your mindset. Instead of wanting to be heard, your focus should be on how this advice or how this opinion will benefit other people. So you might say the same type of thing, you know, the idea is the same, but your heart is in a different place. Your heart is no longer focused on how can people hear my voice. Your heart is now focused on, okay, I need to articulate this opinion because I really think that this is going to be the best, give us the best results for this client, or give us the best, the fastest way of doing this task. So sometimes when you flip your mindset, the way that you deliver the information naturally becomes a lot more streamlined, a lot less pushy. So give that a go. So yeah, that's it. You know, start being more strategic today. Easy, right? Look, this is a skill that takes time to build. So don't feel like you have to get it all right straight away. But the key here is to, you know, start putting down that to-do list every now and then. You know, maybe you might start every day with 5 minutes of just thinking time, thinking strategically, thinking about the big picture, asking yourself those questions. Because when you get stuck into your to-do list, that's kind of the easy part. I know it's hard work trying to keep up with things, but it's kind of easy as well because you're not using your brain, you're just doing stuff. If you want to be elevated to the next level in your career, you need to start acting like a leader. You need to start showing people that you can be trusted as someone who can make decisions, draw on their own experiences, have an opinion, have an impact, have influence. Okay, so you need to think about whether you are being the most effective that you could be. And if the answer is no, then great. You've got some tools here to start thinking strategically to bring even more value to your role. So I'm sure you've come across amazing leaders before, and I can guarantee you that all of these leaders are people who think about the what ifs or the how could we. When we are feeling unfulfilled or there's lots of barriers in place, we are probably stuck in the opposite way of thinking of, it's so unfair that they have stopped me from doing this. They've put all these barriers in place. Instead, think about, okay, there are these barriers in place. How could I do this instead? How could I still achieve this? So you have to start thinking like this now, no matter how junior you are or how inexperienced you feel, you have got to start thinking like this now, because the way you think determines how you act, and the way you act determines how people perceive you and how people treat you. And you want to be treated like the leader you were supposed to be. So Andrea says, if we are not strategic enough, all paths are good for our goals. Oh, I'll have to ask you what you mean by that in the question time. Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Andrea. That's really interesting. Firstly, I'll quickly go through next steps for you. So I want you to all choose at least one of the methods that I talked about for being strategic and use it this week. Who's going to do it? Give me a yes in the chat box if you're going to try one of those methods this week. The next thing is, if this is something you want to learn more about and how to, I guess, put these into action in your own career, I highly encourage you to book a career clarity call with me and get some of that personalized advice. And finally, share what you've learned. You know, you have all invested 45 minutes of your time today to learn something new, and hopefully it's been helpful. So help other people, uplift other people in your network, whether they're women or men or people who work in STEM or not. This is all information that is going to help other people to, I guess, step up in their careers and maybe get unstuck from anything that they're currently stuck on. Cool. Angeli's going to try one of the methods. Pauline's going to do the to-do list exercise. So I guess that's the questions. Andrea, the to-do list and the urgent versus important axis. Perfect. Angie's going to spend more thinking time. Good, 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 good. Tanya also will be using the important urgent method. Great. It's a really handy tool that you can whip out really quickly. Andrea is going to plan 80% of the time and 20% of time executing. Love that. Okay, lots of people wanting to use the important versus urgent method and questioning what's on their to-do list. Great. Amazing. So I will go back to Andrea's comment before I take any questions, but these are all the ways that you can get in contact with me. I highly encourage all of you to join the Wonder Women in STEM Facebook group. This is where the recording of this session will be posted if you want to rewatch it. But otherwise, let's go on to questions. So if anyone has a question, you can let me know in the chat box and I'll come to you. But Andrea, what do you mean by all paths are good for our goals?
Yeah, I mean, and thanks a lot for the workshop. Really interesting, first of all. Yeah, if we are not, I mean, in my opinion, if we're not strategic in our goals, I mean, what we want to achieve in our lives, professional or private, doesn't matter. You can take any path that life throws at you because it will be good anyways, because you don't have like a set goals and set strategies to achieve your goals. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes it's really good to be open to things that you haven't planned for, especially if you're not sure which direction to go. That's great, you know, accept all paths. But I can guarantee you that once you start following a path, you might be like, oh, I don't know if I really like this. Or you might be like, I love this. This is definitely a path I want to grow into more. And that's a really good chance to start being strategic. That's why I do believe that, you know, at the start of our careers, we don't have to be that strategic. We're kind of exploring what we want. So we're happy to go down all paths. But at some point, you will probably want to go down a specific one. Cool. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hiya, it's Angie.
Hey,
I thought I'd go on video. I don't know if you can see me or not.
I can see you. I can see you.
One thing I was thinking of in this strategy space and setting goals is I can set goals, but I never achieve them.
Mhm.
So that's obviously my own issue then. I don't know if it's in the planning or what, but yeah, for the last few years when I've had goals, I've kind of gone, yeah, these are my goals. And I just don't look at them again and don't even bother trying to achieve them. And I think that's probably a little bit from my workplace. No one's ever followed up with me. No one's ever challenged me on it. So I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know if it requires a comment, but yeah, it's just something that came to mind about, yeah, setting goals, heading for a strategy. I tend to set the goals and go off on this strategy.
Yeah. And you know what? That is more common than you think. You're definitely
Okay,
not
good to
alone
hear.
there. But there's also a way to try and figure that out. So I guess we would need to kind of get stuck into what's happened. Why aren't you following the goals? Is it that your goals aren't really that important to you? Sometimes we set goals that we think sound good to other people. I used to do this all the time. My boss would be like, where do you want to take your career? And I'm like, inside I was like, oh, I've got no idea, so I'll just say this stuff. So is it that, or is it, is something getting in the way? Do you fear failure so you don't try in the first place? There can be all sorts of things. I don't know. What's your first thoughts there?
Feeling failure could be one. I think also I was working at a business that changed direction quite quickly. So the goals, you never really had time to focus on those goals, because when you set the goals, this was the business's focus, and then all of a sudden there's redundancies and you change in direction, let's just say, and there's headcount reductions and whatnot, and the priorities have to change and everyone has to change direction. So then they just kind of came unimportant, even though they were part of the bigger strategy. You just tend to then drop them because you just didn't have time to focus on that particular goal.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes, our workplaces don't really facilitate our goals, and we have to learn a way to deal with that, because this is your career as much as you're working for this company.
Exactly. That's something that's made me realize that, going forward, I am going to focus more so on goal setting and actually achieving the goals, because otherwise you just feel like you've not achieved it when you get to the end of the year and you're like, oh yeah, there's those goals. We have to have a conversation about this now.
Yeah. And there are ways that you can set up your environment so it's a little bit more easy for yourself to achieve those. But yeah, if you want to chat about this further, I'd love to jump on a call.
I've sent you a little message via the link you sent as well.
Perfect. Lovely. I look forward to speaking to you. Are there any other questions before we jump off? No? It was so lovely to have you all on here today. I know a few people have had to jump off. Thank you so much for coming along and for getting involved. I hope that you've all taken something really useful away from today, and that this will help you to step up into that next level, to just kind of break through that little barrier that you're facing right now, so that you'll be seen as a leader in your own workplace. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you for making the time to do this.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tiffany.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Tiff. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.